Trust me, everyone has a 16-year-old dream of drifting through the Japanese mountains because it's been idolized on TikTok as like the cool thing to do, okay? Everyone also, if not that, like wants to become the next Formula One driver slash racer because it's beautiful and it's sexy and that's what all the cool people do. But it actually ends up costing you like $5 million a year. That's like just for the entry. There's like a whole scene. There seems to be a big thing about that, okay? And there's been a lot of people that have talked about it, okay? But that's a little bit difficult to jump into. Everyone has aspirations, okay, to do those sort of things, but it can be tough to jump into, which can sometimes start to feel a little bit, you feel a little underinflated, right? A little bit moist. Just not the most exciting experience in the world. So 99% of the world goes out for a drive in their local area until they find an open back road. They drop it down a few gears and you let her eat, all right? You just let her give her just a couple 2-3 gears. You have a little bit of fun. You shake when you take your hand off the shifter and you're good to go. Now, it doesn't matter if you're actually good at it or not, if you're actually going fast or not, or if you're going to miss the turn. Just letting her rip is like the only thing that you really want to do because it's what young enthusiasts do to get the feeling of what we all will know and eventually love, and it's called racing. I'm Alex Tedify on Instagram, and today we're gonna be talking about the activity that too many people often forget about. The activity that's honestly more fun than it looks because it just is. Today, we're gonna be talking about the history of drag racing. Spence keeps mouthing off and just throw my chancla at him. Welcome to Fitment Industries, where we talk about wheels, tires, and suspension for your newly acquired vehicle or otherwise. If you've got an aftermarket car, add it to our size 16 shoe gallery where we've got over 40,000 vehicles. That actually kind of lines up with me threatening to throw a shoe at Jake Spence. Anyway, where you can actually see what wheels and tires fit your car, so it's not a guessing game. Because guess what? Guessing games suck, and I don't like them, okay? It's like Clue, but worse. Plus, we just launched our very own aftermarket wheel company, Artisa Artformed Wheels, a monoblock, ultralight, directionally designed wheel company that you should definitely check out. We're a bit biased, but it's pretty cool. There's a couple behind me, and in addition to that, you can check it out over at fitmentindustries.com. The history of drag racing can unofficially start when like the first two vehicles actually trotted off the line and met at their very first stoplight together back in 1900, pretty much. However, official traces take you back to California, like pretty much all things automotive in the dry lake beds, actually, which is pretty interesting. Vehicles in the early 20th century were growing in stability, production, and of course, the thing that we all know and love, people like you and people like me, power, all right? So much so that with like a little tiny bit of proper work here and there, giving you enough of a straight, you were able to actually take these cars and go pretty darn quick, just short of like 200 miles an hour. It's impressive. It's actually 100 miles an hour. It's not as impressive anymore, is it? And while the activity would grow over the years, it didn't reach its like first full milestone until 1938, when a man by the name of Wally Parks helped in organizing the Southern California Timing Association event in the Mojave Desert, essentially the first official way for a bunch of people that loved going fast in a straight line to do so with a couple guidelines, a couple rules, and maybe a trophy or two to see who was the fastest. I mean, it was a then pretty basic competition, but it was very progressive for what it was trying to do, because up until this point, most enthusiasts were just driving their cars from Los Angeles to the desert. They were essentially ripping their fenders off just to lose weight, and also you didn't have the caked up dirt that would come from it, and any other body panels that they possibly could, and then just racing them down a straight with other people that managed to be there. Wally essentially tried to get some structure to it, a little bit of makeup to make it actually an organized event. And as Wally and others began to be more involved, structure began being built such as trap times, match races, racing group competitions, and had names things like the Muroc Racing Association, which was sponsored by an oil company, which is actually pretty interesting. I don't know any of those names anymore, but it also had, even dare I say, some safety restrictions that they were putting in place so that people could run their cars safely without accidentally like bursting into flames. The first and most notable event took place was in 1938 and had over 300 entrances, if that's even the right word, and each entrance was $1. The sport became solidified, and ever since Wally Parks and a bunch of those individuals really started to grow the sport, it grabbed roots and just never let go. Now, even though the world wars dampened the growth of the sport until many Americans returned in 1945, they returned back with some extra money, some spare time, and the need for the adrenaline due to the effects of, well, a world war. It'll do that to you. So they came back, and essentially the thing that they wanted to do back in the late 30s was essentially another thing that they were going to do in the late 40s. 1940s. When the GIs came home, the sport took off. And with it, Wally Parks' ambition to make this a big deal. Pretty much as big of a deal as he possibly could. Using his time as the editor of the Hot Rod magazine at the time, and connections that he had pre-Dub Dub 2, he managed to pull together enough veteran-fevered automotive fanatics to start the NHRA, something that most people should know, which is known as the National Hot Rod Association. This is the biggest granddaddy of them all when it comes to groups, especially in the automotive scene. The NHRA is huge, becoming their very first president, all while being within the first 12 months of the first official drag strip that actually opened during the same period of time. Essentially, drag racing just started taking off. Everybody wanted to do it, and there was very few places or organizations that hosted such a way or an event to do so. The NHRA would grow with a team of individuals that met Parks' determination to grow the sport. Ultimately, Wally Parks is like the guy. We'll get to him in a little bit. But what was once a few enthusiasts and a couple hundred cars became home, the NHRA, to 144 racetracks hosting nearly 4,000 events every single year with over 85,000 active members, which was huge. I mean, this event is absolutely just, the organization is large, okay? Fun fact for the Garage Talks, okay? Hot rod, or the term hot rod, was coined a few years after World War II. There's a lot of people that say that it was Wally Parks, but there was actually no confirmed person that started calling it that. But I mean, Parks did set the foundation for drag racing and hot rodding, so it could have been him. He was a road test driver for GM before moving to being a process engineer over at GM. He eventually became the SCTA general manager. He co-developed America's first hot rod show in Los Angeles. He helped scale and start the Hot Rod magazine that he would inevitably become editor-in-chief for. He won an Ollie Award, okay? He won Man of the Decade by Popular Hot Rodding magazine. He won so many awards in his lifetime, he has his own statue. Wally Parks is a man that likely laid the foundation for almost, if not every single domestic person that loves cars. If you knew him and it was your grandpa and your grandpa was into cars, he knew Wally Parks. If your grandma was into cars, she knew Wally Parks, okay? He was Man of the Year in 1973 and he was nominated by SEMA, okay? And there are 40 more years of successes and awards that Wally earned during his lifetime that cemented that name as the iconic name in the drag racing scene. As the 60s, 70s, and 80s came around, as either Americans moved into other countries or were deployed for other things like the Cold War, the pastime hobby of drag racing went with them, and the NHRA and everything that it held dear essentially grew internationally. Drag racing became not only just a national sport, but a worldwide activity that had people racing in coal mines, airports, back roads, and more. Pretty much anywhere that they could find a straight, people were starting to race cars all across the world, specifically in a straight line. And as the sport grew, the classes, the terminologies, and the people who lived for the sport did with it. The essential foundation was built in America, but everything past that began to grow across the world. You had businesses like Mickey Thompson create the first slingshot called the Smoking White Owl. I mean, it was like one of the fastest cars at the time. You had names eventually hit legendary status like Don Garlitz and Sammy Miller and more people like that they just developed records, they set them, and people were just insanely impressed by how fast you could go and not actually run into a wall or burn into flames or absolutely blow up, which is pretty tough to do when you start considering how fast these people were going back in the 60s and 70s. But as drag racing has nearly had a century of massive growth, it's not really talked about as much anymore with a younger group. Like, we don't talk about it that much. I mean, talk about going to a drag racing event on Friday and not as many people actually really want to participate or go, which I think is kind of sort of lame, all right? And that has a lot to do with the fact that the hobby is just a little bit more dated than a lot of the younger hobbies that a lot of people are finding themselves in love with. Drag racing is a staple in the North American automotive culture. It cemented the continued push of domestic car manufacturers to create higher horsepower cars. A lot of the trims and a lot of the super cool rare models came from the push of manufacturers to create a drag racing prepped car straight from the factory. It created the fundamental competitiveness most people yearn for in the sport when it came to getting in a car and driving in a straight line. And if that's not enough, NHRA is second only to NASCAR when it comes to attendance, fan audience size, television rating, and sponsorship dollars. I mean, it's still a big deal. We just don't talk about it that much, but it's like the one thing that we all like to do on a spare back road. It also is the official version of our unofficial activity on the back roads we did when we were young, or what we brag about when we go home and say we pulled buses against a base model Corvette. That's it. There's like an official version to do this. It's called drag racing. Now, whether you're looking back to the basic beginnings of Wally Parks, the explosion of the fast-paced, crazy gas concoctions of the 70s that they mixed these chemicals together to make these cars even faster, or the new generation youth groups that participate in the NHRA, the sport continues to be revolutionary. It continues to be huge, and you should go out and be a part of it if it's something that interests you, because it's fun, it's loud, there's flames, and it's just cool. But what do you think about drag racing? Let us know in the comment section below, and of course, if you're looking for aftermarket wheels, tires, or suspension for your newly acquired drag vehicle or otherwise, be sure to hit us up over at fitmentindustries.com. And if you're wondering if we have bead locks, the answer is yes, okay? Overrated or not, I just think it's super cool, and it reminds me of the original Need for Speed Underground days where there's literally own type of driving you could do, and it was driving it in a straight line and turning lanes and then upshifting on the green, which is always super difficult on some of those platforms. But either way, let us know what you want us to talk about next, and of course, we will see you later. Peace.